Hi folks, my name's Louis Martin and I am your lecturer tutor for the Criminal Law Unit 3 CILEx module. I think the main thing to understand about criminal law is it's probably not as hard or difficult for some as some of the other modules because of the way that it's mediated in the press and the way that many people have been subject to crime, victims of crime, and it's one of the more glamorized areas of law. So some of you might find this module particularly interesting. I personally think that to do well on this module, you need to go and have a look initially at the feedback for the past papers. That would be my starting point. What I'll do over the next couple of months is I'll obviously deliver some lectures and present some PowerPoints with voiceovers, and I'll also do some of these YouTube type discussions to give you some tips and hints. But my main tip would be, from my observations from teaching this last year, the CILEx markers are really prescriptive. They really do want you to set it out exactly how they like it. So go to the feedback sheet that I've put on week 1. This is the suggested answers from January 2018 from the markers to the candidates and tutors. And the purpose of that was to give candidates and tutors guidance to the key points candidates should have included in their answers. So for the CILEx criminal law exam, it's 1.5 hours with 15 minutes reading time. The paper's split into 2. So you've got a section A, which consists of 10 factual questions. So these are like knowledge tests, knowledge of the key elements of criminal liability, some of the defences, some of the offences such as criminal damage and homicides. So these are more like traditional knowledge where you recount information from the written material. Having looked at the past papers in the past, it looks like the same sort of questions crop up. So it's important to have a look through the past papers and to see which questions have appeared in the past. Some of them are highly likely to appear in the future. Some of the questions, such as questions about the elements of criminal law, such as the actus reus, which is, some people say the guilty act, others say everything in the offence apart from the mental element. And the mens rea, which is the mind, the mental element, the fault element, the guilty mind. In a nutshell, criminal law can be defined quite easily in an equation. Actus reus plus mens rea, or strict liability, minus a defence equals criminal liability. So pretty much that sums it up. Criminal law is about establishing guilt, blame, liability. It's not about remedies or compensation, although there is an element of compensation given to victims, but this is more to do with apportioning blame and guilt. And the simplest thing is, with the actus reus and the mens rea, they need to coincide. So a guilty action needs to coincide with a guilty mind. And we talk about defences, and defences are excuses or reasons or justifications where a person does something that could be, on first sort of view, it may look like a crime, but they may have an excuse or an explanation as to why they've done something, which would remove their blame and make them not criminal. So that's what a defence is. You might have heard me speak about the guilty mind, and then I also mentioned strict liability. So strict liability is a situation where a person doesn't need to even think they are guilty just by their mere actions. These are very, very sort of minor or regulatory offences. So we see strict liability when it comes to food hygiene, health and safety, speeding, sort of parking offences, driving offences, excess alcohol. These they're called regulatory offences, and they were designed to keep society safe. So the prosecution doesn't need to prove all of the sort of actus reus and mens rea elements. They just need to show that the person's conduct was sufficient. So I'll talk about that in more detail as we go on. But that basic series of that definition, or those key elements, they're the fundamental things you need to learn about. I'll put some readings up, some chapters out of books that I've got. I'll put them on for you to read. But as you can see by the feedback given by the CILEx markers, they do require quite a bit of detail in the first section, the 1 to 10. And if you can have a look and see how they recommend that you answer that, that will really help. The second section of the exam consists of 3 scenarios, like storylines. And these stories contain in them offences that you need to spot, be able to identify and write about. So you're given written scenarios, like mini stories, and you look in them, look through them, read them, and you'll see characters in there that commit various offences. And what they require you to do is identify these offences and write them out, given the actus reus and the mens rea. Look at any possible defences and explain who would be criminally liable. They also, looking at the feedback, require you to write in relevant case law authority. So some of the leading cases, which they've written into their feedback, which I will highlight and include on my lectures from looking at their feedback. Again, the questions in section 2 are broken down. They require a little bit more analysis. These are problem questions. But there won't be a problem for you if you obviously know the law and the cases and the actus reus and the mens rea of different offences. So what they're looking for in this is for you to look at a series of incidents, choose the most appropriate offences and defences, and write out the crimes that are committed, and then write out who would be liable. They're not really too interested in touching on criminal litigation at all. This is purely black letter law, which means the law, the rules, the acts and the sections, and from looking at the feedback, the most relevant case law. So again, the questions in the second section offer you some choice. Some of the offences seem to be grouped into property type offences, whilst others are grouped into offences against the person. There is also the requirement to know the criminal liability equation. So you'll need to know the actus reus and the mens rea of all the different offences, of which we'll talk about over the next couple of weeks. You're given 3 scenarios and you'll need to choose one. I recommend that you go and have a look through the scenarios even at this early stage and get a flavour of what's going to be expected in the exam, and then work backwards from the exam. So it's like reverse engineer. See what's required. Some of it initially will seem difficult for you on the first glance, but as we speak about this over the next couple of weeks, we'll keep going back to these this feedback and the mock questions or these past papers, and we'll work through them. I know that some of you will have access to Microsoft Teams, and I'll be putting things on there. Others, I think for the Virgin Media people, I'm going to create these YouTube type presentations so that you, even if you can't access Teams, you'll be able to access YouTube and you'll be able to see these. And you'll be able to email me with any questions or queries. Thank you.